Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're looking at two guys from entirely different worlds. I mean, completely different centuries and cultures. Yet, when we dig into the source material, we find that their stories are woven together by this incredible thread of tactical genius and an absolute refusal to surrender. We're exploring the legendary lives of Pemulwuy and Giovanni Pezzu.
So, what on earth connects a 16th century Italian mercenary born into just ridiculous wealth to an 18th century Aboriginal Australian resistance leader fiercely defending his ancestral home? Sounds like the setup to a historical riddle, right? But as we'll see, the answer boils down to something totally universal: sheer courage. Both of these men were forced to completely reinvent the rulebook against overwhelmingly superior forces, and both left legacies that outlasted their own lifetimes.
All right, Section 1, Defenders of the Homeland, Origins.
The contrast in how these two started out is it's mind-blowing. On one side, we have Pemulwuy. Born around 1750, he was a proud leader of the Bajigo clan, part of the Erin Nation, right in the area we now call Sydney, Australia. His entire identity was inextricably tied to the land. Then, on the flip side, you've got Giovanni. Born in 1498 as Ludovico de' Medici, those Medici, one of the most powerful, insanely wealthy, and politically connected families in all of Europe. He literally could have spent his life lounging in luxury and playing politics. But no, both of these men actively chose the gritty, dangerous path of the warrior to protect their homes.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. The invading forces, facing overwhelming odds. To really grasp their greatness, you gotta understand what they were up against. The threats both men faced were just massive. For Pemulwuy, it was the British settlers. During what we now call the Frontier Wars, British forces were aggressively expanding into and occupying indigenous lands, totally upending a way of life that had been there for literally thousands of years. For Giovanni, the backdrop was the absolute chaos of the Italian wars. The Italian peninsula was totally fractured, and you had these massive foreign powers like France and the Holy Roman Empire just constantly fighting for a piece of the pie. In both scenarios, these two men found themselves standing right in the path of this massive foreign expansion, fighting tooth and nail to protect their communities.
Moving on to Section 3, Innovators of Warfare, Revolutionary Tactics. Here's the thing. When you're outnumbered and outgunned, you absolutely cannot fight by the conventional rules. You have to invent new ones. Let's look at Giovanni first. He became a condottiero, basically a highly skilled mercenary commander. These guys were absolute game changers during the brutal Italian wars. Now, he actually earned this totally intense name, Dalle Bande Nere, which translates to "of the black bands." Why? Because he ordered his troops to wear black mourning armbands after a Medici pope died. That striking visual, it quickly became a symbol of pure terror for anyone facing them across the battlefield.
But his real genius wasn't just in his branding, it was his tactics. At the time, European warfare was all about traditional heavy cavalry. Think of your massive, heavily armored knights just moving at a snail's pace. Giovanni completely flipped the script on this. He ditched the heavy armor for fast, lightly armored cavalry units. His soldiers could move like lightning, strike completely unexpectedly, and just vanish before the clunkier enemy armies could even figure out what hit them. It was a literal paradigm shift for 16th century combat.
Now let's switch gears and look at Pemulwuy's tactical brilliance. Remember, he's going up against an enemy armed with modern firearms, while his guys have traditional weapons. So step 1, he leaned entirely into his deep, absolute knowledge of the land. Step 2, he organized these incredibly effective guerrilla-style attacks. He knew exactly how to use the environment to catch the British off guard, and then just melt right back into the bush. And step 3, even when facing down guns, his warriors fought fiercely with traditional spears and shields, essentially turning the landscape itself into their greatest weapon. And get this, it wasn't just about territory. Pemulwuy strategically targeted his attacks to protect vital indigenous food sources and sacred sites that were being destroyed. He knew for sure that this was a fight for the very survival of his people's entire way of life.
Which brings us to Section 4, Defying the Odds, Fear and Respect.
Let's talk about Pemulwuy's legendary resilience, because it's incredible. He didn't just fight a skirmish or two. He spearheaded a continuous resistance for over a decade. He was reportedly captured multiple times by British forces, and yet, somehow, he miraculously escaped every single time against truly impossible odds. His knack for surviving gunfire and escaping captivity was so extraordinary that his people actually started to believe he possessed supernatural powers. To the British authorities, he was this deeply feared, wildly dangerous rebel. But to Indigenous Australians, absolute hero. He was a unifying force who brought different Aboriginal groups together to stand firm for their shared culture and identity.
And this brilliantly illustrates the kind of respect Giovanni earned over in Italy too. People literally considered him the last true spirit of Italian military independence. Because he understood the terrain so well, and because he relied so heavily on speed and surprise, Giovanni was constantly outmaneuvering armies that were way bigger and way better equipped. His intense discipline and his ability to hype up his men in the most lethal situations earned him massive respect from his allies and absolute dread from his enemies. He really marked that crucial turning point from medieval combat right into modern military strategy.
All right, Section 5, Tragic Ends, Immortal Legacies.
The harsh reality of being a frontline defender, well, it rarely ends peacefully. When we map out their timelines, it really hits home just how short, yet intensely impactful, their periods of resistance actually were. Giovanni, born in 1498, meets his end on the battlefield in 1526. Pemulwuy, born around 1750, is killed in 1802 after 10 grueling years of leading the resistance. Both of these men gave their literal lives for their causes.
Let's look at the stark facts of their final days. In 1526, right in the thick of fighting the Holy Roman Empire, Giovanni took a cannonball to the leg. Even though doctors tried to amputate, infection set in, and the last great condottiero died from his wounds at just 28 years old. 28! Pemulwuy's end was equally brutal. In 1802, he was finally shot and killed by British forces. And in this really stark display of the sheer fear and disrespect the British had for him, his head was actually taken and sent all the way to England as a trophy.
So, the crucial point we take away from both of these incredible figures is this. True bravery isn't measured by your weapons. True greatness isn't measured by how long you live. It's measured by the will to stand up for what is right. Giovanni delle Bandinere literally changed the face of warfare in a mere 28 years on Earth. Pemulwuy stood down an expanding global empire with spears, shields, and just this unbreakable spirit, ensuring his people's resistance would be remembered forever.
Which leaves us with one final thought. How will your legacy be measured? When you're faced with totally overwhelming odds, do you cling to the old ways or do you innovate? Do you back down or do you stand up for what's right? I really hope exploring the resilience of Pemulwuy and Giovanni has sparked your curiosity as much as it has mine. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we decode some more fascinating history.